Hello friends. Recently I have been looking at a lot of Node.js frameworks to get familiar with the stack, and after looking at a lot of frameworks, I think Adonis JS is one framework which I felt very interesting. It's very much like Laravel. So I being working on Laravel for quite some time, and those of you who have worked with Laravel, you'll feel that this framework is very much like the Laravel framework. A lot of concepts are from there, and it just feels like home. So in this series, what we are going to do is look at the basics of how Adonis JS works. What are the different ways we can start using the framework, and then in the subsequent video we will create a basic application which is like a movie review site, where we will search for movies from a third-party API service and then save that information in our database and write reviews and do all those stuff. So a basic CRUD application which we will develop with that framework to get a good understanding of how things work. So in this first video, we are going to touch upon how the framework works, the basic folder structure, what goes where, and things like that, right? So like Laravel, I think the documentation for Adonis JS is very good, and I would highly recommend that you go through each and every section of this. If you just continue to read, I think it's like a storybook. You just go one by one and you will understand what happens on every section of the framework. Okay. Now to get started with Adonis JS, you will require Node. I have Node version 10 on my system, so you can see it's 10.15.2. Okay, and I have npm installed as well. Sorry, it comes the moment you install Node. So we are good in here, and I also have Git. Okay, to install Adonis, you have quite a few options. One is, if you install Adonis JS CLI globally, then you can do things like Adonis new and then the project name, very much similar to how you used to do Laravel new and the project name, right? So we can do that. You can also use npx. Okay, it's there. Or you can also clone the version, okay, from Git, and then you can get started with it. Now what I will do is I will start with Adonis as a CLI, because I have already installed this globally on my machine. So I get Adonis on my CLI. Okay, so this is where I have started recording the video. I have done nothing else. So let's do Adonis new and learning Adonis. Let's create this folder. It will take some time to clone the project and install the dependencies. So once that is done, we'll come back. So we have created a new project using the Adonis CLI. Our project's name is Learning Adonis, and so as per instructions, let's go inside the folder. Okay, and to run that, we will need to run this command, which is Adonis serve dev. But before we do that, let's see what was done. Okay, it first did some requirement checks. Okay, that's fine. Ensure project directory is clean. It cloned the Adonis JS project, most probably from Git, because if you remember, I told you that we can also clone the boilerplates from here, right? So that was done. Then it installed the dependencies, the node modules. It created an env file. Okay, this is where we will store all our important variables which should not be visible to others. And then it created a key. Okay, so the key for that application is very important to encrypt the cookies, and it is highly recommended that we create a new key every time we create a project, and that's why it is done. Also, you should ensure that your production environment's app key is different from your staging and your local instance. Okay, so with that done, let's get inside our project, run it. It should be available on localhost port 333. Let's get into that. 3333. Okay. It says it's working, and let us open the project in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so we have the code in front of us. This is our env. It says host is this, port, it is configurable. Then app URL, our node environment is development, and you can see here is the app key, right? So these things are typical to an application. And now let's look at the different folders which are available to us and what's in each of those folders, right? So the first thing which you will see is the app folder, like Laravel. This is where all our application logic will be, right? The middlewares are here, the models are here, user model is here, right? And so yes, this is where our business logic will be there. There are certain folders which are not present right now, for example controllers, events, etc., which are going to be created when we create those specific classes. For example, once I create the first controller, the controller folder will be created. Okay, moving on, we have the config folder. And again, those of you who are familiar with Laravel, you will know that configuration is where all the application settings are stored. So things like the env, right, the app name, all these things are inside the configuration. We can see that we have database as a configuration, in where right now we will pick the connection from env, and if there is nothing, okay, which is this, then it will mean that if we can't find it from DB connection, then the default is SQLite. So let's see what is there in the database. Yes, it is SQLite, but what are the other options which we have? We have MySQL, right, which will look for host, port, user, password, database, right? It has support for Postgres, and there are certain mode drivers as well, which we can see in the documentation, right? So this is how configurations work. We have app, auth, body parser, course, database, and many other. Moving on, we have database, which has migrations. Again, this is something which is used to create tables. We maintain a code to structure our database tables, and factory is to generate. If you're into testing, if you want to generate a lot of random data, then factories are the way to go. There are seeders as well. Seeders are way to again create data in a particular format that you want, but then seeders are not there by default. Those will be created once you create a new seeder. Then we have public folder, right? Public folder is a folder from where you will serve all your static files. Static file will include all your CSS, JavaScript, images, and whatnot, right? So if you see right now, the logo, the pyramid image, splash, everything is here, right? This is where all the CSS is written, and any image or anything which we need to serve into the website or the application should reside in the public folder. And again, the application has mapped this as the root folder. So yeah, that's one configuration which the application does. The next thing is resources. Okay, resources is like, obviously the views are inside resources. So those who have worked with Laravel, you will know what resources are. But for those who have not, who are not familiar with Laravel, resources is where we put all our views, we put our JavaScripts and our less or SAS files. The only difference between a resource JavaScript and a public JavaScript file is that resource folder will have um, as you can see, the development version of the JavaScript, whereas the public folder will have the final compiled code, which will be generated. So it is true for both JavaScript as well as CSS. Okay, so yeah, resources will come up. We will have views. We will also have JavaScript and a JS folder and a SAS folder, which we will create in the subsequent videos when we work on the front end stuff. Moving along, we have a start folder which has app.js. Okay, this is where Adonis is told how many different providers are there. Okay, and a lot of other configurations are there. For example, these are all the providers which are right now being loaded: app provider, view, Lucid provider, which is related to the ORM, CORS, Shield, session provider, things like that, right? Kernel, again, it controls your middlewares and other global middlewares as well. And then we have routes. This is the JS file where we create all our routes. And then we have other stuff like editor config. ACE is like the artisan for Laravel. It is a file which will allow you to run different kinds of commands to maybe generate certain kinds of files like controllers and views and do other stuff. And yeah, so that's how the folder structure is for Adonis JS. Now let's move on to seeing how we create basic routes and work with different kinds of variations of routes. So now that we have a good sense of the different folders in the application and what they represent, let's look at the basic routings available with Adonis. So I'll go into start routes.js. Right now, by default, we can see that we have route on and then render welcome, which means on the index URL, we are saying we will need to render this view, which has certain things, right? So we can change anything here and it will obviously reflect here. So it works is something which is added. Maybe this is part of the SVG, right? Yes, this is the SVG. We can change this text. Feel confident about your code. I'll add a full stop, save, refresh, and yes. Okay. Now, if we want to create one more route, we can say route.on test, right? On test, we want to render a test blade. Okay. So now let's just create a new edge template file. So test.edge. By the way, like Laravel uses Blade for its templating engine, Adonis uses Edge. The syntaxes are generally very same, so don't need to worry too much. But yeah, if you want, you can go through the documentation, and we will also touch upon a few important things in the subsequent videos. So yeah, hold on. Right now we are doing very basic stuff. So HTML5, I'll just say this is test page. And here. Okay, so we created a new view and we said that on route test, we need to render test. So if we go here and just do test, we load the content, right? So that is one way of defining a route. Second one, which is a very basic one, is let's just say we will continue with the test. So on test, we don't want to render, but we want to return something. So let's say hello world. Okay, we want to return this text. Okay, sorry, it will be dot get. Okay, so get, and we return this. However, this is really not a particular format which we will be using, but yeah, this is one way. It's a closure through which we can work on. So the next kind of route which we will try out is, let's say, with parameters. So we'll have say user. Okay, and then we will have ID. Then inside the closure, we can do something like return user with ID, and then let's just do $params.id. So what we are saying is a URL /user and then ID, and then we are taking that parameter inside the text. So say user /1, and we get that, right? So parameter is available, and we can do different things with that. So this is another way of using parameters inside a route. Then there is one more way of sending out different kinds of response, okay, based on the request by the user. So for example, let's just change this. Okay, I will add formats. Okay, and in here I will have JSON, HTML, right? So with this, if I refresh, nothing happens, right? It's the same. However, if I do something like this, and in here we'll need to obviously do if request, which means I need to take the request object as well from there. So request.format. Okay, it's a function, and we will check for this. If that is equal to JSON, what we can do is we can say user, and we'll play around a bit. This ID. And now if I hit refresh, you can see what I'm getting is a JSON response. If I remove this, or if I do .html, I get this. However, the moment I do JSON, okay, this route understands because of this that the requested format is a JSON format, so it will return this instead of this. Okay, the one more thing which we can do in here is, for example, right now if I don't do anything else, right, like HTML or JSON, it will automatically take HTML as the default, but we can say true as the second parameter, and then what will happen is this won't work. We'll have to declare a format. So HTML, or JSON, okay, both will work. However, I need to provide the format. Without the format, it just gives me a 404. Okay, so this is an interesting piece, and a nice way to define certain routes. I have seen that many times we may want to have the same URL pass a JSON response. Let's say we have posts, right? So we have posts which are so /post is returning me a view where all the first 10 posts are listed. However, if we are consuming the same URL through a mobile app, I would want that it just gives me the JSON data. So I can do that with this kind of routes. So now, so far we have only seen closures, right? We haven't added a controller. So why don't we do that? So Adonis make controller, welcome controller. Okay. It will ask me what kind of request I'm going to handle in this controller. I'll say HTTP. I'm not working with WebSockets right now. So an HTTP controller will be created inside the controllers folder, right? So the first thing which I'm going to do is the /. I'll just make it as get. I'll say it's a get URL. Okay. And on that URL, I'll need to call the index method. Straightforward. Okay. In here, I will render the view so I can also pick up the view variable and say return view.render welcome. Okay, this is done. I'll hit save and let's see if we're getting the same output on our index. We do. So how do we confirm that what we have done is correct? Why don't we inside welcome controller, so we'll copy this, right? Welcome controller, and this will be test. Okay, so now if I do a test, it will complain that the method doesn't exist, which is fine, but let's just do test. Okay, and very similar to what we had done previously, we'll have view which will return test. Now if we hit refresh, you can see we are returning the test page, right? And for some reason, if we want to handle this as well, we can do that. For example, let's just say we'll create a new one, a new route, route dot get let's say post / id. Okay, and we'll have post controller dot index. Okay, we'll need to create that controller. I'll again select HTTP request, so I'll get a post controller, and in that I'll have an index method. Now what are we doing? Like this, first of all, I'll copy this. So formats are required. Okay, so formats are required, and let's copy that. If we have I'll need the request in here and params in here, right? So if the request format is JSON for now, why don't we say this is a JSON format? Otherwise, this is HTML format. Okay, and then we have post / id. So post / 1. Okay, I have to specify. So .html, and this is HTML format. We do JSON. This is JSON format. Now let's just, as I told you, let's say we have post list.edge, right? For now, let's do this. Okay, and we will have, this is my list of posts, and we'll have 1, 2. Okay, this is my HTML, so I can do, I don't need the params actually now, come to think of it. Just do return view render. We have post -list, and if we want a JSON, we'll have 1, 2. So what are we expecting? We are expecting that when it is a JSON request, we'll have an array of 1 and 2 returned, and when it is HTML, we will get this entire thing. So post list is the title. So let's look at that. Right, we are getting JSON, and if we move it to, oops, what did I do? .html. Yeah, we get an HTML rendered view with the output which we wanted. So yeah, this is how we can play around with basic routings. Several other ways of handling routes, which you can go through the documentation to get more details. For example, we can have resources and more of the stuff, how to name routes and filtering of resources, etc., which we will again talk about more in details when we do our application. But yeah, this is how the basic routing works. So now that we have looked at the routing and also we saw how controllers work, next thing which we should look at is the request object. So let's go to Visual Studio Code, and inside here you can see we have used request and view. So now request, apart from this format, has a lot more things which we can work with. So why don't we create a new route? Let's just call it /form. Okay, and for now let's just continue to use post controller dot, let's say form. Okay, so we'll create that. Why don't we do it form page? I don't want this to be conflicting with any variable, so we will have that. We will have the request. Okay, not maybe on this, I'll have just the view. Okay, this is a get URL, and then the second one we will create is, let's say, a post. Okay, so we have form/save, form page save. So in here we will have request, and we will also have response. Okay, just in the way we want it. So in form page, why don't we create a new view and name it form page dot edge. Okay, we'll have form, very basic form in here. So form action method will be post. Okay, now action, right? If you remember, I told you that we can do named routes, right? Which means I can name a route as, and I can say it is form.save. Okay, so what is going to happen is I can refer that in my view like this, route form save. Okay, now the only advantage of having a named route is that I can at any point of time change this URL to anything. Okay, and my application doesn't need to change at all because I have always used the named route, right? So the URLs can change. However, I mean, it doesn't change very frequently, to be very frank, but yeah, we need to do that. Okay, so we have a post, we have a form, I have an input text. Now let's say the name is name. Okay, and we have a button which says save. Okay, now in here we will return view.render our form page. So if we load up our route, we have a form. Now it will not submit because we don't have a CSRF token. So if you have worked with Laravel again, I'm time and again going back to Laravel, but what Adonis does is it has certain security modules in place, and one of them is CSRF. Okay, CSRF token. What it does is it allows us to safeguard all our post URLs by looking for a token which was generated through the application using the session and the cookies which is on the application. So which means every form, when it is created, there is a token generated for that particular form which the app will understand, and when the form is posted, that CSRF token is also posted as a hidden value. So when the controller gets the request, right at that point there is a middleware. Now that middleware will check for that CSRF token, and if that token is valid, it will let the request pass. But if it is not valid, or if there is no CSRF token, it will give us an error like we got, which is the middleware is saying that it's an invalid CSRF token because we haven't added it. So how do we add the CSRF token? So if you go into the documentation, there is a helper function available. So CSRF protection is here. So in Laravel it is CSRF_token. I just need to check what is the exact thing. It's CSRF field. Okay, so it will create an input field, something like that. Okay, so this is something which we need to copy and go into a view and paste it here, right? Now if I try to refresh and submit, didn't do anything. Okay, I don't need this, I don't need test, and I don't need welcome. So post controller, return hi. Yes, so we're getting that. So what is happening is we get the entire request. So if we do request dot all, okay, and hit save, we will see the JSON. So we have the CSRF field in here, and this is what the value was. So why don't we put some meaningful value, right? So hit save and we get this. Now we can also do some other stuff. For example, we have request.post, which will give me all the post values. Right now I did all, so post, and then go back, save, giving me the same things. I can also do certain things like let's say request accept, okay, accept, and then I can say CSRF, okay, and is it CSRF underscore token, or let me see. So I'm also trying this out. So I hit save, it did load me, it gave me this, so I'll try it with this one. Yeah, so if I want to kind of reject or just ignore just one field like this and get everything else, I can do that. I can also do only, which means I can only have name, and the output will be same, because in here initially it was accept this and now it is only name. So yeah, the output will be same. And there are other things. For example, I can also do request dot input name, okay. So when you have a lot of other values coming in, right, you can do request dot input. So yeah, this is how we can play around with the request object. It gives us different functions through which we can get the data which is coming through the request, and we can then process it accordingly. Things like validations and everything are part of it. And so yeah, as a next step, let's look at how we can do validation actually. There are forms. We interact with the user. We want to ensure that the data which is coming from the user is in has some sanity, right? So validations are important. Now for validations, we have in Adonis an Adonis how do you say module which is responsible for the validation. So why don't we look at start dot, right? So we have in here, we should have a validation. We don't have, is it? Or okay, I think we need to install the Adonis add-on. So we will go here, we will do Adonis install @Adonis JS /validator. Okay, it will install the validator package or the provider, so as to say, and then it opens up this, where what I basically can do is copy this thing and inside start app.js, right? So this is the start app.js, right? Yes, start app.js. I need to add this inside the providers, right? And that's all that I need to do, and then we should be able to get the rest inside our controller. Okay, so let's say we have this form, right? We have this, and let's say name, and then we also have name equals phone number. Okay, so yeah, so first of all, we need to load the validator plugin. Okay, so we do constant validator or validate, okay, equals, and then we do use validator. Okay, so this is how we load the plugin. Now, once we have this, what we can do is inside here, we will have constant rules where we define, let's say we have two fields, right? We have name, which we feel is required, and it should be minimum 3. And we have phone, which is again required, minimum 5. Okay, so these are the two rules which I have for our validator. So constant validation equals, let's just say await validate request.all. We will send the entire request array and the rules. Okay, it's an await, so we will need to do async. Okay, now this validate is an await function because sometimes it may also have database level query, so which means the result will not be instantaneous. So we would want that the request stops here, waits for it to pass, and then move along. So now if our validation fails, so validation dot fails, we have this method. So if we have this, then what we will have to do is use the session. So not the session storage, but the session. So response we are still not using, but we will need that. Rather, we will use session dot, we'll say with errors. Okay, errors from our validation dot messages function. Okay, we will get this, and now we will need the response. So return response, redirect, we will redirect the user back. Okay, and if that is not the case, we will show the name. Okay, let's go ahead with that. What are we doing? We loaded the validator, we saved it in a constant called validate, and in here we first created an object of rules. Then in the validate function, right, we passed in the request all and the rules, and we are expecting validation. When the validation is available, we will see whether it fails or not. If it fails, then we in the session we put the errors and return the user back, and if we don't get the error, we show the name. So load the form. Okay, we have two fields. The name is here, 982. Okay, so we have this, and we save. It shows the name. Okay, it is going here. Why don't we remove this so that we have something to fail? Right, and yeah, we are redirected back to that page, which means something happened, something where we got back to this page. So why don't we do certain changes to see what exactly is happening? So value, first thing is we'll change the value to old, let's say name, or it is empty. Okay, this is one way to get the value from the session when there are errors. Okay, so this was empty. I typed in my name and I hit save. That's interesting. The name, I need to do a flash all, I guess. Not flash all, is it? I think it was flash all. I don't exactly remember how it was done. Let's see. Yes. So sorry about that. I actually forgot the second function. So what I'm doing is, when the validation is failing, right, I'm putting the validation messages, and I'm also keeping all the input variables. Now in the view, what I am saying is the value should be either the old value and if it is not, then it is empty. So when the name was sent and the phone number was missing and the validation failed, I had the name in place. Now if I hit save, I will have the phone number in place, but the name is missing, right? And now that there is a validation error, but we are not seeing the message. So let's see how we can show the message as well. Okay, it's a little bit of code which we need to write. So it's ELIF, element if, I think. I'll have a span. Okay, in that I'll have $self. Okay, this is where we get the how do you say, the value of the error. Okay, this is something which you'll find in the documentation as well. And then we will do get error for. Okay, get error for, and that will be name. Okay, and that the third argument is has error for name. Okay, this is the format. I think now we should see an error. Let's hit save. Yes, it is there. How do we do that? We do a BR, is it? Yeah, in here. I think that should work. I'll have a BR in here as well. BR here, and then I'll copy this. Okay, this is still very basic, so I'm going through this kind of a system. Otherwise, we will have a proper thing in place. So the required validation field on name, this is fine. Okay, and if I hit save, it complains about the phone number as well. But if I keep both and hit save, I'm here, which is the name. So just to clear the confusion, hello, validation success. Okay, yeah. So as you can see, what we are able to do is, from the form, we are able to send a post request and we're able to do the validation. If the validation is failing, we send it back to the form again, and we retain the values if there was something. And if the validation fails, we are also showing the errors. So yeah, we have been able to do the basic stuff, and we are able to create form and do use the framework. So in the next video, what we will do is, with this information, let's start creating a new project where we will look at fetching information from a third-party service, saving the data into the database, and even look at how we can set up our front-end scaffolding, or use Bootstrap and Vue using Laravel Mix to set up those JavaScript and CSS files. So yeah, so keep watching, guys, and if you like the video, do click on the thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.